My sister said that portrait proved the young marquis was deeply in love with me. I married him and suffered for 7 years before discovering that those love letters were actually written to her. Later, I pointed to the portrait and said, "But I don't have that mole, little sister. Look at the corner of the figure's eye in this painting. That tear-shaped mole is proof of Lord Pei's deep love for you." My older sister, Qiao Wanning, spoke in a voice so gentle it seemed as if water could be squeezed from it. She gently placed the exquisitely framed scroll into my hands, her eyes and brows brimming with the joy of having made this arrangement for me. I looked down at the scroll. The beauty in the painting had a delicate profile, and the tiny tear mole at the corner of her eye stood out strikingly in the candlelight. In my past life, I was beguiled by this so-called deep affection, without noticing that this tear-shaped mole was identical to the one at the corner of my sister's eye. I joyfully married into the marquis's household only to be subjected to 7 years of torment. Trapped like a caged bird. It was not until my dying moments that I realized those countless love letters, supposedly pouring out his heart to me, were in fact written, word for word, to Qiao Wanning. At that moment, as my fingertips brushed against the cool scroll, I took a deep breath, forced down the surging hatred in my heart, looked up to meet Qiao Wanning's eyes, which seemed to hold a calculating glint, and softened my expression, feigning a touch of innocence and shyness. "Sister, is it truly the case that the Marquis of Pei will marry no one but me? He is of such noble standing. While I am merely a daughter born out of wedlock in the Qiao family, I am truly humbled." Qiao Wanning took my hand, her fingernails digging gently into my palm, the pressure perfectly conveying her anxiety. "Silly girl. The Marquis of Pei is no ordinary man. If he had no interest in you, why would he have sent someone to deliver this token of his affection? Isn't that you in the portrait? He values Yoha couldn't care less about the distinction between legitimate and illegitimate children." Seeing her earnest yet devious expression, I sneered inwardly. Did she really think I was that foolish Xiao Yanhui from my past life? I smoothly withdrew my hand, carefully rolled up the portrait, and let a perfectly measured look of anticipation cross my face. "You're right, sister. Since it's the Marquis' sincere offer, it would be pretentious of me to refuse any longer." However, I changed the subject and paused deliberately. Sure enough, I saw a fleeting, barely perceptible flicker of anxiety in her eyes. "Just what?" "It's just that, though this portrait is beautiful, it's slightly different from how I usually look." I raised my hand to gently touch the corner of my eye and feigned innocent distress. "I don't usually wear a tear-shaped mole, yet it's so prominent in this portrait. If I were to enter the Marquis' mansion in the future, and the Marquis saw that I didn't have this mole on my face, might he think I'm not the one he's been longing for?" Qiao Wanning's smile froze for a moment. Her eyes flickered briefly, but she quickly covered it up. "The Marquis was merely expressing his feelings through the painting, certainly wasn't telling you to look exactly like the portrait. You're worrying too much, little sister. This marriage is a match bestowed by His Majesty. You need only rest assured and prepare for the wedding." The more urgently she urged me, the tighter the web in my heart became. I said no more, but simply nodded in agreement, my eyes brimming with joy. "You're right, sister. I was being foolish." After seeing Qiao Wanning off, I returned to my room and stared at the portrait, already having a plan in mind. Since Pei Yanxi was so eager to marry me, even going so far as to lure me into a trap in this way, I would grant him his wish. But as for this game of chess, we'll see who's the player and who's the pawn. I summoned my personal maid and whispered, "Go find out if the Marquis of Pei has been meeting with any outside visitors in private in recent days, especially famous actresses in the city or anyone who has ties to our household. Miss, if the mistress finds out about this, I'm afraid it won't be easy to explain," the maid said hesitantly. I gave her a cold glance. The intimidating gaze made her heart skip a beat, and she immediately lowered her head. "This servant understands. I'll go do it right away." Leaning back on the soft couch, I ran my fingertips over the scroll, already forming a plan for my counterattack in my mind. "The humiliation and suffering you inflicted on me in my past life and in this life, I will reclaim it all. Bit by bit, with interest. Since you wanted me to marry into the Marquis' household to save face for you, I will make that very household the place where your reputations are ruined and you meet your end." The night was as dark as ink. The betrothal gifts from the marquis's mansion had already been carried into the front hall. Red silk streamers hung from every branch, and the entire mansion was filled with a festive atmosphere. Qiao's father sat in the seat of honor, his face radiating unmistakable pride. As if my marriage into the marquis's household were the greatest achievement of his life. Qiao Wanning sat below him, thoughtfully pouring tea for her father. Her every gesture exuded dignity, yet her peripheral vision kept drifting involuntarily toward me, carrying a hint of contempt born of certainty of victory. I sat upright in my boudoir, fingering the jade pendant that symbolized our betrothal. The pendant felt smooth and warm to the touch and was indeed quite valuable, but upon closer inspection, I noticed the character one engraved in a highly concealed spot on the inside. In my past life, I was blind in both sight and heart. I never noticed such details, assuming it was simply a token of favor bestowed upon me by the marquis's household. Looking back now, this was by no means a token of love, it was clearly irrefutable evidence of their secret affair. Sis, tomorrow is your big day. I'm so happy for you. Qiao Wanning's voice came from outside the door. She pushed the door open and walked in, holding a bowl of bird's nest soup. I made this myself. You're in poor health, so drink this, it'll give you more energy for tomorrow. I looked up at her. Today she was wearing a plain light blue blouse, which made her delicate, charming face stand out even more. I took the bowl of bird's nest soup but didn't drink it right away. Instead, I set it down on the edge of the table and smiled. Thank you for your thoughtfulness, sister. It's strange. Really, I can't help but feel this marriage has come too quickly, and I have a vague sense of unease. Although Marquis Pei is a prodigy, there are constant rumors circulating in the capital that he has someone else in his heart. Since you've spent quite a bit of time with him, sister, have you heard anything to that effect? Qiao Wanning's expression shifted slightly, but she quickly concealed it and smiled gently. A man of the marquis's stature is bound to have his share of baseless rumors circulating about him. Don't let it get to you, little sister, since he's already presented his betrothal gifts. It's clear he has feelings for you. Is that so? I deliberately let a bitter smile cross my face. But what if, after I enter the mansion, I discover that the tear-shaped mole in this portrait isn't mine? Might the marquis feel he's been deceived or even take his anger out on the Qiao family? You know, sister, how much father values this marriage. If I don't handle this well, I'm afraid it could tarnish your reputation. I watched her expression intently, not missing a single flicker of emotion on her face. Her fingers tightened slightly around the silk handkerchief, and a hint of malice flashed in her eyes. But she quickly resumed her role as the kind and caring older sister. You're worrying too much, little sister. Once you've entered the household and devote yourself to serving the marquis, he'll come to appreciate your virtues on his own. You're right, sister, I said, nodding slightly as my gaze fell on the mole at the corner of her eye. Then I changed the subject. By the way, sister, does the beauty in this portrait really resemble me 7 out of 10? I can't help but feel it looks more like you painted it while looking in a mirror. The air froze in an instant. Qiao Wanning's smile froze completely on her face. She apparently hadn't expected me to bring it up so directly. The room was deathly quiet, with only the crisp crackling of the candle wicks breaking the silence. You sure have a way with words, little sister, Qiao Wanning said, forcing herself to remain calm as she stood up. I have something to do, so I'm going back to my room. Watching her back as she practically fled in panic, a cold smile curled at the corners of my mouth. Since you want to bring Met his pawn into the game, I'll turn this chessboard upside down. Late at night, I summoned my trusted confidant and used a file to gently scrape away the character Wan from the jade pendant, then engraved a character Yen that looked almost identical in its place. I wanted them to witness with their own eyes, on their wedding night and under the glow of the bright red wedding candles, how the token of their love which they were so certain of would turn into a laughingstock. I got up and walked to the window, gazing in the direction of the home mansion. In my past life, you trampled me into the mud. In this life, I will make sure you lose all face in front of everyone and are despised by the masses. Pei Yanji, since you've chosen Qiao Wanning, I will make sure that while you have her, you lose everything else. On the day of my wedding, the streets were lined with red decorations for 10 li. As I sat in the palanquin carried by 8 men, beneath the heavy phoenix crown, I could feel every inch of the ground trembling beneath me. The people lining the road whispered among themselves, all talking about this concubine-born daughter of the Chiao family who was about to marry into the marquis' household. A cold smile played on my lips. The game had only just begun today. Upon entering the main gate of the home mansion, Pei Yanji stood before the hall in his wedding robes, his posture as straight and sturdy as a pine tree. When he saw me, his eyes betrayed no emotion whatsoever. In fact, they even held a faint, almost imperceptible hint of coldness. I thought to myself with silent sarcasm, Pei Yanji. Pei Yanji, do you really think you're marrying the one who holds the key to your heart? The matchmaker's sharp voice echoed through the hall. First bow to heaven and earth. I slowly bent my knee, and in that moment, I could feel everyone around me staring at me. Out of the corner of my eye, I scanned the crowd and saw Chiao Waning standing among the guests, a calculating gleam in her eyes. She thought she was using me as a pawn to make me endure all the cold treatment in her place. But she didn't realize that right now, I was the one holding the knife. After the wedding ceremony, I was led into the bridal chamber. Red candles cast a bright glow throughout the room, and Pei Yanji's hand as he lifted my veil seemed slightly half-hearted. His gaze fell on my face, and he furrowed his brow slightly, as if he were searching for someone through me. Are you Chiao Yanhui? His voice was cold, devoid of any warmth. I slowly raised my eyes. In that instant, I suppressed all the bitterness and resentment from my past life, leaving only a gentle and innocent expression. My lord, I am Yanhui. This jade pendant is the token of your love that you gave me. I have kept it close to my heart all this time. I took the jade pendant I had altered from my bosom, cradled it in both hands, and handed it to him. Pei Yanji glanced at the pendant. His gaze froze, then took on an extremely eerie expression. He snatched the pendant abruptly, staring intently at the character Wild Goose, and his face instantly darkened to the color of iron. This jade pendant. Who told you to engrave that character on it? He demanded in a low voice, his tone laced with suppressed anger. I put on an innocent yet terrified expression, and tears welled up in my eyes. What do you mean? Your Grace, wasn't this a gift you gave to Yanhui? Why, when you see this jade pendant, do you look as if you've seen something you shouldn't have? Pei Yanji's expression changed drastically. He seemed to realize something, suddenly stood up, and walked toward the door. I watched his back and sneered inwardly. Chiao Waning, since you're so eager to see us get married, I'll have Pei Yanji go ask you himself whose jade pendant this really is. In the bridal chamber, I calmly removed my phoenix crown and looked at the table laden with wedding pastries, wine, and dishes. For the past 7 years, I've had enough of being treated with cold indifference. In this lifetime, I will make every single person in the marquis' mansion kneel at my feet. A series of hurried footsteps echoed from outside the door. Judging by the sound, Pei Yanji was storming toward Chiao Waning's residence. Seething with rage, I knew that tonight at the marquis' mansion would be a sleepless night. I walked over to the dressing table, undid my elaborate hairpin, and revealed my cold, piercing eyes. In my past life, I thought marrying into the marquis' household was my destiny. But little did I know it was a trap. In this life, I will destroy that trap with my own hands and send the one who set it into the abyss forever. Beneath the festive red silk lies the path of vengeance I am about to embark upon. I pulled a note containing a secret message from my bosom. It was evidence I'd gathered before my death in my previous life, proving that Pei Yanji had embezzled military rations. Since I was going to destroy him, I might as well do it thoroughly. I hid it inside the pillowcase and silently thought to myself, Pei Yanji, Chiao Waning, your good times are over. That night was destined to be the night of upheaval at the home mansion, and I stood by, watching coldly, waiting for the storm to break. The moment Pei Yanji took the jade pendant, I knew that the drama had only just begun. While he met with Chiao Waning in a side courtyard of the marquis' mansion, I calmly removed my makeup, slipped into a simple, dark red gown, and dismissed my attendants. I am not the sort of woman who is content to remain in her boudoir, waiting for a man's favor. The bitter lessons of my past life taught me that, within these vast, secluded mansions, power and the hearts of others are the only things one can truly rely on. About half an hour later, the sound of hurried footsteps came from outside the door, mixed with Pei Yinji's angry growls. I stood by the window, watching the lights in the courtyard grow closer. Pei Yinji stormed into the room with long, swift strides. His eyes, which usually carried a distant coldness, were now filled with rage. Behind him stood Qiao Wanning, her face deathly pale as she was escorted by his attendants. Qiao Yanhui, what on earth are you up to? Pei Yinji casually flung the jade pendant onto the table. It struck the surface with a crisp clang that rang particularly jarring in the silent bridal chamber. Wanner's name was clearly engraved on this pendant. Why did you file it down and replace it with your own? I walked slowly to the table, picked up the jade pendant, and let my fingertips gently trace the character for goose. Turning to look at Qiao Wanning, who was kneeling on the ground, trembling with fear, a faint smile played at the corners of my mouth. That's a most interesting question, Your Excellency. Since this jade pendant is a betrothal gift, it naturally belongs to me. I merely noticed some imperfections in the jade, so I had a craftsman polish them away and re-engrave the name to show my sincerity. How is it that, in the marquis's words, this has become my fault? I paused, my gaze piercing Qiao Wanning like the tip of a needle. As for you, sister, showing up in the marquis's side courtyard in the dead of night, and judging by what the guards were saying outside just now, it seems you know the origin of this jade pendant even better than I do. Qiao Wanning's face was deathly pale. She bit her lower lip, tears welling up in her eyes. When she looked up at Pei Yan, her eyes were filled with a pitiful, pleading expression. Your Grace, I was just worried that my younger sister, being new here, might not understand the rules and might anger you. That's why Are you afraid I'll anger the Marquis? Or are you afraid that my harmonious marriage with him will overshadow you, the one who's been stealing away in the dead of night? I cut through her pretense. My voice was soft, yet it rang out with conviction. I stepped closer to her, looking down from above at this woman who had once toyed with me at her whim in a past life. Sister, this portrait is of you, isn't it? And that mole at the corner of your eye, that's yours too, isn't it? Since you and the Marquis had long been in love, why did you insist on shoving this painting into my hands back then and urging me to marry into the Marquis's household? What nonsense are you talking about? Qiao Wanning exclaimed, a flicker of panic crossing her eyes. Whether I'm talking nonsense or not, Your Grace will decide for yourself. I turned around and met Pei Yinji's probing gaze. Your Grace, you pride yourself on your deep affection, but from start to finish, what kind of match has this marriage been? If you truly love my sister, why drag me into this on our wedding day? Is the reputation of the Marquis's household really worth gambling with the lives of two sisters? Pei Yinji's face alternated between pale and ashen. He looked at Qiao Wanning, then at me, and a calculating gleam gradually emerged in the depths of his eyes. He was a man who took great care to protect his reputation. If the truth were to come out now, he would not only be accused of deceiving the emperor, but also condemned by the public for moral misconduct. I knew his Achilles heel all too well. He could be heartless and cold, but he could never afford to ruin his political career. Enough, Pei Yinji snapped, putting an end to the argument in the room. He looked at Qiao Wanning, the tenderness that had once filled his eyes now gone. Wanning, go back to your room first. I'll handle what happened tonight. Your Grace. Qiao Wanning tried to protest reluctantly, but was forcibly led away by Pei Yinji's personal attendants. As soon as the door closed, Pei Yinji sat down in a chair, steadied his breathing, and looked at me with a more scrutinizing gaze. You've changed. People have to grow up eventually. I poured myself a cup of cold tea and drank it in one gulp. Your Grace, let's be frank with each other. Now that I've married into this family, I'm firmly established as the mistress of the Marquis's mansion, and I can shield you from the storms outside. As long as you grant me the dignity I deserve regarding my sister or the matter of the portrait, I am willing to turn a blind eye. But if you still intend to use me as a shield for the two of you, I won't hesitate to bring this matter to the attention of the Grand Lady or even to His Majesty himself. This is my ultimatum to him. I also know that, given Pei Yinji's personality, he'll never admit defeat easily. He'll try to control me, but I intend to let him believe he can control me, so that he'll walk, step by step, into the trap I've set for him. I could even sense that Pei Yinji was weighing the pros and cons. In this whirlpool of political intrigue, even the slightest misstep could lead to ruin. I wasn't simply seeking revenge. I wanted the entire marquis' mansion to crumble. I stared coldly at the man before me, my heart utterly unmoved. The love I had felt in my past life had long since turned to ashes. All that remained now was a thirst for destruction. "You're quite bold," Pei Yinji said after a long silence, his tone surprisingly tinged with a hint of dangerous admiration. "But do you really think you can beat me with your current abilities? Whether I can beat you or not, why not give it a try and find out?" I set down my teacup and gave him a charming smile, though there was not a trace of warmth in that smile. It sent a strange chill down his spine. In the days that followed, I began to audit the home mansion's accounts. Qiao Wanning had previously made reckless withdrawals of silver within the mansion in an attempt to curry favor with Pei Yinji, leaving the books riddled with discrepancies. I categorized these accounts and compiled them into ledgers. I presented them to Lady Pei with a calm demeanor, appearing extremely deferential each time. Lady Pei had already harbored some dissatisfaction with Qiao Wanning, and upon seeing the accounts I had organized, her distaste for Qiao Wanning deepened even further. I'm not just targeting Qiao Wanning, I am severing the ties between the marquis' household and the Qiao family. In my previous life, the marquis' household ran rampant in the imperial court thanks to the Qiao family's influence. In this life, I intend to let them rot from within first. Pei Yinji thought he was marrying a meek and submissive concubine's daughter, but little did he know that he was welcoming a gravedigger capable of digging his family's grave with her own hands. Whenever I see Qiao Wanning running into obstacles throughout the mansion and facing the servants' cold remarks, I feel a sense of satisfaction at the thought of revenge. But this is only the beginning. I know that Pei Yinji is secretly plotting an even grander scheme, perhaps a deal with powerful officials in the imperial court, or perhaps an even more covert exchange of favors. I must wait for a fatal moment to utterly destroy everything he has, along with his dignity. Late at night, when all was quiet, I sat in my study, gazing at the moonlight outside the window. This vast, secluded mansion was like a magnificent tomb. But I, Qiao Yanhui, would never be the one buried here. I picked up my pen and wrote the first name on the paper, Pei Yinji. Then, I wrote the following name below it, Qiao Wanning. The game has begun, and the pieces have been placed. I stood up, walked over to the bronze mirror, and gazed at the young yet resolute face reflected within. In my past life, I was as lowly as dust. In this life, I will be like the phoenix rising from the ashes, even if it means burning this world to the ground. I will forge my own path. On the day of the flower viewing banquet, the spring scenery was enchanting. The marquis's garden was ablaze with a profusion of rare and beautiful flowers of every color, and the ladies from various households had been invited to attend. The air was thick with the cloyingly sweet scent of perfume and cosmetics. I wore a long gown of flowing cloud brocade and my makeup was delicate and fresh, though I had deliberately applied a very faint touch of cinnabar between my brows, giving me an appearance that was both delicate and imbued with an indescribable air of cool detachment. As a regular guest at the home mansion, Qiao Wanning naturally attended the event in her finest attire. Today, she had specially chosen a beetroot tunic and skirt. The vibrant color not only set off her porcelain-smooth skin but also made the tear-shaped mole at the corner of her eye all the more striking. As everyone's gaze swept over that mole, many noble women secretly marveled, remarking that it was indeed a rare beauty mark. I stood a short distance away, a round fan clutched in my hand, watching her with a cold gaze as she moved effortlessly among the guests, all the while calculating the right moment. Pei Yinji was also present today. He stood beside the grand lady, his expression as aloof as ever. Yet whenever his gaze swept over Qiao Wanning, a barely perceptible ripple would stir in the depths of his eyes. As still as an ancient well. "Mrs. Qiao," I hear the theme of this flower viewing banquet is people and paintings. I wonder if the marquis has prepared a masterpiece that will dazzle everyone. Asked the wife of a minister, a curious woman, covering her mouth and laughing. Upon hearing this, Payenji's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. Just as he was about to decline, Xiao Wanning spoke up first. The marquis has always been very critical of paintings, but a few days ago, he painted a portrait of a beauty for his beloved here in the mansion. The depth of his artistic skill was truly breathtaking. As she spoke, she glanced at me, whether intentionally or not, with a hint of defiance in her eyes. Why don't you ask the marquis to bring out that painting today, so everyone can have a look? What do you say? The guests around them immediately began to jeer. Payenji's expression shifted slightly, and a hint of warning flashed in his gaze as he looked at Xiao Wanning. But at this point, with everyone watching, if he didn't produce it, he would appear to have something to hide. He had no choice but to force himself to remain calm and motioned for a servant to bring the scroll. As the scroll slowly unfurled, the beauty in the portrait came to life on the paper. Her profile, her grace, and the distinctive tear-shaped mole at the corner of her eye were almost identical to Xiao Wanning's. A murmur rose from the crowd. Some marveled at the exquisite craftsmanship, while others began whispering among themselves, speculating about the identity of the woman in the painting. I let out a soft sigh, stepped out of the crowd, walked up to the painting, and said, as if in admiration, "This painting is truly a masterpiece." But just what? Xiao Wanning's heart leapt with joy. Thinking I was about to say this was a portrait of me, she quickly asked, "What exactly?" "It's just that I find it strange," I said, turning my head to look at Payenji with a sincere tone. "When the marquis asked for my hand in marriage, he said the person in this painting was me, but as a concubine's daughter of the Qiao family, I've never had this tear-shaped mole on my face. Not once in my entire life. And only now, upon seeing my elder sister, have I realized that the figure in the painting bears a striking resemblance to the corner of my sister's eye. Could it be that the marquis made a mistake back then while painting it, and the brush slipped?" That single sentence sent shockwaves through the room. The entire hall instantly fell into a deathly silence, with everyone's gaze darting back and forth between me and Xiao Wanning. Xiao Wanning's face went pale in an instant. Her fingernails dug deep into her palms. Yet she managed to force an awkward smile. "My sister is joking. Artists value artistic conception above all else. Why get so hung up on such details?" "Artistic vision," I chuckled softly, my gaze turning cold in an instant. "If it were for artistic vision, then this painting would depict you, sister." But when the marquis gave me this painting back then, he clearly said it was a token of our love. "Sister, you've known the marquis for many years. Could it be that the mole at the corner of your eye is actually the spirit of the woman in this painting manifesting itself?" The whispers around him grew louder and louder, and Payenji's face had turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. He wanted to speak up in his defense, but as he looked at the suspicious glances all around him, he knew that if he admitted the portrait was of Xiao Wanning, it would confirm the charges of deceiving the emperor and illicit affair. But if he insisted it was a portrait of me, he would be calling a deer a horse and would become a complete laughingstock. "My lord, why aren't you saying anything?" I pressed him relentlessly, my voice clear and melodious, yet every word cut to the core. "Could it be that this painting is actually a love letter you wrote to my sister? But by some twist of fate, it ended up in my hands." "Shut up." Payenji could no longer contain his anger and snapped. His outburst, however, caught the grand lady's attention. She had been sitting to one side, sipping her tea. But now she slowly set down her teacup and fixed Payenji with a cold stare. "Yenji, what on earth is going on here?" Payenji's whole body went rigid, and a fine sheen of sweat beaded on his forehead. At that moment, however, it suddenly clicked for me, and I exclaimed in surprise, "Oh my, I remember now." Behind the portrait that day, there seemed to be a tiny, barely visible line of text at the bottom. At the time, I thought it was some kind of poem, but now that I think about it, it seems to be Sister Wanning's maiden name. As soon as those words were spoken, Xiao Wanning collapsed completely to the ground. I turned to look at her, a hint of pity in my eyes. Sister, if that really is your name, why did you keep it from me and why did you urge me to marry into the marquis's household? Could it be that you wanted to watch the marquis lose all face in front of everyone? So that he would come to despise me completely, and then you could take advantage of the situation. What a masterstroke cutting off the problem at its root. Not only did I shift all suspicion onto Xiao Wanning, but I also successfully portrayed myself as an innocent, kind-hearted victim who had been completely deceived. As Pei Yanji watched the people around him cast contemptuous glances his way, his eyes filled with hatred. Yet he couldn't bring himself to say a single word. This flower-viewing banquet was bound to become a laughingstock throughout the capital. Yet as I stood in the center of the crowd, letting the wind blow through the hem of my skirt, my heart remained completely unmoved. That wasn't enough. Merely having my reputation ruined was nowhere near enough to make up for the 7 years of torment I endured in my past life. Someone, put that painting away, said Pei Yanji, gritting his teeth and forcing himself to remain calm. Today's banquet is cancelled. See the guests out. The guests began to take their leave, and as they departed, each one cast a look at the marquis's mansion filled with mockery and derision. I watched them leave one by one, feeling the vast mansion gradually slip back into silence. Pei Yanji walked up to me, his gaze sharp enough to tear me to pieces. Xiao Yanhui, you really are a venomous snake. The marquis flatters me, I said, bowing slightly. I looked up at him, a wistful smile playing at the corners of my mouth. If the marquis hadn't been so cold toward me from the start, why would I have had to tread so carefully? From now on, the good times for you and my sister are just beginning. He swept his sleeve and walked away, and Xiao Wanning was also led away by her attendants. All that remained in the garden was a carpet of withered begonia blossoms, trembling in the wind. As I watched the scene, the flame in my heart burned ever brighter. In this world, the kind are taken advantage of. Rather than be a weak woman who endures endless injustices, I'd rather be a villain who controls the entire situation. As night fell, I returned to my room, mulling over my next move. Now that Pei Yanji had been thoroughly disgraced, his political career was next in line. Not only had he embezzled military rations, but he had also secretly exchanged letters with a vassal prince on the border. If even one of these charges were brought to the emperor's attention, he would never be able to recover. I sat by candlelight and picked up my pen to write a letter. I intended to send this incriminating evidence to the current right minister through special channels. The right minister and the Pei family have long been at odds. Once I handed this evidence over to him, someone would naturally take care of Pei Yanji for me. After I finished writing the letter, I placed it in a locked box. The tension in this vast compound was growing ever more intense, and I was the only survivor here. By the third day after the flower-viewing banquet, rumors in the capital had already spread like wildfire, completely destroying the reputation. Pei Yanji claimed to be ill and stayed home, refusing to receive visitors, but in reality, he was trying to conceal his increasingly precarious position in the imperial court. As for me, the victim of this scandal, I paid my respects to the grand lady morning and evening, playing the role of a virtuous wife, devastated yet still sensible and capable of managing the household in order to win the sympathy and support of everyone in the mansion. That afternoon, I took the trouble to personally prepare a bowl of lotus seed pudding and bring it to the grand lady. The elderly lady had been so upset by the scandalous affair in recent days that her health had suffered. She was now reclining on a soft couch with her eyes closed, resting. When she saw me enter, she opened her eyes, and her gaze held a complex, scrutinizing look that I had never seen before. Yan Hui, you've been wronged, the grand lady sighed, waving her hand to dismiss the maidservant from the room. I've already looked into the matter of that painting. The handwriting on the back of the scroll is indeed Wan Ning's, and the inscription is not part of the painting itself, but a fragment of a love poem. I scoffed inwardly, but my face betrayed just the right amount of sorrow. Grand lady, Yan Hui doesn't care about any of that. Yan Hui is simply heartbroken. If they truly love each other, why did they drag me into this mess in the first place? Now that I've married into the marquis's household, I am one of them. No matter what they do, the reputation of this household must not be ruined in an instant because of some personal affair. You're such a sensible child, the grand lady said, nodding and patting my hand. That child, Yanji, has simply been led astray. Rest assured. Now that you've stepped through the gates of our marquis' mansion, I'll never let you come to any harm. Upon hearing those words, I knew the time had come. I lowered my gaze slightly, a hint of hesitation in my voice. Grand lady, Yen, we shouldn't have spoken out of turn. But while sorting through the accounts these past few days, I noticed some irregularities in the household's expenditures. In particular, the marquis' several properties outside the city seem to be closely associated with some rather unsavory individuals. I fear the marquis may have been momentarily misled and taken advantage of. If this were to implicate the marquis' household, it would spell utter ruin. The dowager's expression shifted slightly, and her gaze instantly turned sharp. Are you saying he associates with those unsavory characters? Yen, we wouldn't dare speak out of turn. But the numbers in the ledgers simply don't add up. I took a ledger from my sleeve and gently placed it beside the grand lady. I had painstakingly forged this ledger over the past few days. Though it was a mix of truth and falsehood, it was enough to leave Pei Yanji with no way to defend himself. The dowager took the ledger, and her expression grew increasingly somber the more she looked at it. Although she was a woman confined to the inner quarters of her mansion, she was a woman of great skill who had managed to hold her ground in the marquis' household for so many years. She knew full well that the family's interests took precedence over everything else. If Pei Yanji had truly crossed a taboo of the imperial court, she would not hesitate to sacrifice the pawn to save the king. I said no more, but simply slipped quietly away. As I left the grand lady's courtyard, I ran into Pei Yanji, who was just returning to the manor. He looked gaunt, his eyes bloodshot, and when he saw me, his gaze was filled with intense loathing and hatred. Qiao Yanhui, do you really think you can destroy me? He lowered his voice, his tone menacing. Don't forget you're a member of the Qiao family. 2. If I'm ruined and disgraced, don't even think about walking away unscathed. I stopped in my tracks, turned around, and looked at him with a smile. Your Excellency, you're mistaken. I've never been a member of the Qiao family. I am simply myself. In this marquis' mansion, I am nothing more than a passing guest, while you and my sister are the true protagonists of this grand drama. As for whether I'll walk away unscathed, that depends on whether you fall first or I leave first. Upon hearing this, Pei Yanji suddenly grabbed me by the collar, his eyes filled with madness. What do you really want? When you married into this family, wasn't it also to climb the social ladder? That used to be true, I said, brushing his hand aside with a calm tone. But now, all I want is your lives, or rather, a life more agonizing than death. These words left Pei Yanji frozen in his tracks. As he looked at his once docile wife standing before him, he suddenly felt a fear unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was a shudder that came from the depths of his soul, making him realize that he was no longer facing a lamb at someone's mercy, but a hunter who had been lying in wait for a long time. He didn't press the matter further. He simply flung his sleeve aside in anger and stormed off. I stood there, watching his retreating figure, my heart as calm as still water. With this move, I had completely pitted him against the grand lady. As soon as she began to suspect him, the foundation of his carefully cultivated political career would be utterly shattered. That evening, news arrived from the manor. The grand lady had issued a strict order for Pei Yanji to hand over all the accounts for his estates and had placed him under house arrest, while I was given full authority to take over the management of the manor. Qiao Wanning had intended to come over and make a scene, but the grand lady had her locked up in the woodshed and ordered her to repent. As I sat in my study, looking at these stacks of thick ledgers, a long-lost sense of relief welled up inside me. All the fear, resentment, and oppression from my past life were finally released in that moment. Pei Yanji thought he could use me, but he had no idea that the woman he'd married was his destined nemesis. I picked up my pen and slowly wrote down the final item on the plan. The next crucial step was securing evidence of his embezzlement of military rations. I had already established connections within the right ministers, office. All I needed was the right opportunity to deliver this fatal blow. The night remained deep and still within the mansion. But for me, this long, endless night was about to give way to dawn. I stood up, pushed open the window, and gazed at that faint glimmer of morning light on the horizon. At last, a smile, the most sincere one I'd had since my rebirth, spread across my lips. Qiao Wanning, Pei Yanji, you have stolen 7 years of my life. In this lifetime, I will make you atone for your sins with the rest of your lives. The downfall of the Ho family came much sooner than I had imagined. As Pei Yanji handed over the accounts and the Grand Lady personally inquired into them, the massive deficits he had deliberately concealed finally came to light like a flood bursting through a dam. Every single unexplained expenditure pointed to his private dealings with the frontier princes, as well as the shocking charges of embezzling military rations. The Right Chancellor acted with lightning speed. Before the Grand Lady could even react, the memorial of impeachment had already been placed on the Emperor's desk. The autumn wind in the capital carried a chill. On the day Pei Yanji was taken away by the Imperial Guard, the entire Marquis mansion was thrown into chaos. Qiao Wanning was dragged out of the woodshed, her clothes in tatters and her hair disheveled. She had long since lost the haughty, pampered air she usually carried. She screamed frantically, trying to rush toward Pei Yanji, but was violently kicked aside by a sword-wielding guard. I stood beneath the colonnade, twirling a green grape between my fingers, quietly watching the scene unfold. Pei Yanji, shackled in chains, came to an abrupt halt as he passed in front of me. He fixed his gaze on May's eyes, a mixture of resentment, anger, and disbelief, as if only now did he finally realize that everything that had happened was the result of my own scheming. It was you. You've been setting this up all along. His voice was hoarse, and a savage grin twisted his blood-stained lips. Qiao Yanhui, the biggest mistake I, Pei Yanji, have ever made in my life was underestimating you. I looked at him impassively, my gaze as still as a pool of stagnant water. Your Excellency, it is not that you look down on me, but that you have never regarded anyone else as a human being. In your heart, there is only your political career and your so-called deep affection that is the root cause of why you have ended up in this predicament. He was about to say more when a member of the Imperial Guard roughly shoved him, and he staggered, falling into the deepening twilight. I watched their figures disappear beyond the vermilion-lacquered gates of the Marquis mansion. I felt no wild joy, only a sense of emptiness and relief that a great vendetta had been avenged. Qiao Wanning stumbled over to my feet and reached out to grab the hem of my skirt, but I sidestepped her. She lifted her face, streaked with tears and grime, her eyes brimming with venom. You bitch. It was you. You're the one who ruined the Marquisiery, the one who destroyed everything. I looked down at her, a faint trace of sarcasm curving my lips. It was never me who brought this upon him, it was his own greed. And your insatiable selfishness. Sister, haven't you always said that the woman in this painting is Pei Yanji's true love? Now that he's behind bars, why aren't you his true love, in prison with him, instead of standing here demanding an explanation from me? She froze, a flicker of panic and hesitation crossing her eyes. I let out a cold laugh and turned away. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. The mansion will soon be sealed off, though we both come from the Qiao family. From the moment you plotted against me, our sisterly bond has become a noose around our necks. The servants in the mansion had long since scattered like birds and beasts, and the vast Marquis estate was suddenly deserted. I returned to my room and packed the luggage I had prepared earlier. All the ledgers and letters I had gathered in this mansion had already been sorted and sent to their intended destinations. I didn't need anyone's pity. All I needed was a fresh start. The next day, an imperial edict was issued. Pei Yanji was stripped of his title and exiled to the frontier. All the assets of the Marquis estate were confiscated, although I was nominally his lawful wife. Because I had merited the Emperor's favor by reporting his misdeeds and had never participated in those schemes, the Emperor graciously granted me a full divorce from him. My dowry was returned to me, and I was allowed to return to the Qiao family, though I was not entered into the family registry. I was henceforth free from any connection to that grim, deadly place. As I stepped out through the gate that had confined me for 7 years and had also tracked me to my death in a past life, the sunlight pierced through the gloomy clouds. The air carried the scent of earth and new life. It was the scent of freedom. I have no intention of returning to the Chiao family. That so-called home is nothing more than another hellhole. For the sake of power and influence, my father could hand me over to the next Peiyenji at any moment. I changed into a neat set of men's clothes. The carriage had long been waiting outside the city. I took my original dowry with a fortune sufficient to allow me to travel the length and breadth of the country, or even to establish my own household. The moment the carriage left the capital, I lifted the curtain and took one last look back at the majestic city walls. The sorrow of my past life and the vengeance of this one both vanished completely along with the dust and smoke of the journey. I don't know what lies ahead, but I do know that from now on, I, Qiao Yanhui, will no longer be anyone's vassal or pawn. I am simply myself. Even if the world continues to be fraught with trials and tribulations, I possess an indomitable spirit and dare to take on the heavens and earth. Holding the map in my hand, I look out at the vast, boundless road ahead. The schemes and intrigues of the past will eventually become the gravel beneath my feet, and my future will be a dazzling spectacle that never ends.